Well, hello everyone. How are you doing tonight? It is good to be here. This interview has been a long time in the making. If you've seen our other videos that we have done on this subject, you know that we have had plenty to say and plenty to show you. And I'm just getting everything else going here. And little title here. There we go. And I'm glad that everyone can join, and whoever can join live, I will do my best today to answer any questions that you may have in the chat. If not, later on, you can watch this at any time on YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, Twitch, and of course YouTube. So this is something that we have really we've latched ourselves onto, because we want to be able to, and I'm a one-man army, so give me a second here. Okay, there we go. We've latched ourselves onto this issue because it's so important that people can feel secure in having a well-regulated government and well-regulated good safety measures, right? That's the thing that's been missing, is people can't feel safe and secure in their land, in what their government has done or has not done, which tends to be what we're dealing with this whole subject here, is the fact that the government seems to not be doing much at all. And there are good people who own their land and they want to farm. There are good people who want to do their job. And then there are people who are not such good people that want to keep people from being able to live their livelihood and keep people from being able to do a job, just like Kurt, that's going to be with us today, very adept at his job, a professional. And his opinion is more than an opinion. It's informed. It is a lifetime of work, and he knows what things should be paid attention to and what shouldn't, like violations and stuff is what he does. And everyone on this panel is all trying to have a decent living, to feel good and sleep at night, and that's what everybody wants. And there's so many layers to the whole gas and oil and pipeline and fossil fuels and all that stuff, and all of that is a big subject for everybody, no matter what side of the aisle you land on, no matter what you think about the environment or conservation or climate change. And all of those things are big. But today we're going to set those things to the side and really just cover what our government should be doing and is not doing, and what kind of led up to that, and some really great people to talk about these subjects. First that I'm going to bring in tonight is Nate Lapps, and I'm going to bring you guys in actually, you know what? It's going to be easier. I'm just going to admit everybody here and let you pop in. Oh yeah, you guys, I guess you guys couldn't see me, but I was there. I was just doing the little introduction for you guys, and I was going to introduce you one at a time, but I was going to go ahead and pull everybody in if I could. Sorry you couldn't see me, but anyway, I was leading up to everyone's introductions for what everyone does. And Nate, we started with you on the show, and I just want you to go over just real quickly, who is Nate Lapps and who does he work for and what do you do?
Nate Lapps works for Central Land Consulting, and Central Land Consulting, we are the consultants for the landowners. We're the advocates for the landowners. We're, the company has a land service or a land, department, just similar to, this is exactly what we do, just for the landowner. We will go out and we will educate landowners on the FERC pipeline projects. And then we will also monitor the construction during construction and post. And then, we assist if the landowners have to go into any kind of litigation, we assist in any kind of, evidence or provide site inspections. And we're just trying to just be there for the landowners and trying to help, any issues they have and be the middleman between, the landowner and the company. And sometimes there's a miscommunication or issues, I would say.
Yeah, I say.
We like to try to resolve those issues.
Yeah, that's cool. How long have you been doing it now? been working on for them?
We've been doing it since 2012, and we started Central Land 2015.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah. So that's a long time. That's a long time to be doing that. And have you, before the midship thing came along, have you seen anything on this scale that has been ran this way?
I had a lot of experience in the midstream, and then different parts of the oil and gas. I've never seen it when I worked as a company man or on previous projects. There's always issues. There's always gonna be impacts. There's always gonna be things that the company can't control, might not want to deal with, or the landowners don't want to deal with, but not at this level.
Yeah, this seems like something special altogether. Caroline, you started as an attorney that worked for the agency everyone is so unhappy with FERC. And we talked just a little bit before the show, but I wanted to go into how you made that migration from being there to where you are now, so many years later, being on the other side of it. Oh, we can't hear you. Here we go. I hit the ask to unmute button. It should clear.
Okay, is that good?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, I was a little worried. So yeah, as we had discussed, FERC was my first attorney job out of law school. And so I had a lot of opportunities. I worked on hydroelectric projects, which FERC also regulates. And so I would often get calls from farmers whose irrigation systems might be impacted or whose fields might be flooded, or other landowners about the projects. And I would spend a lot of time talking to them on the phone and educating them on how the process worked, because it was kind of cool for me as a new attorney to be able to show off my expertise. And my supervisors didn't like it that much. They said that the public they should hire their own attorneys. And I said, well, I thought we worked for the public. I thought we worked for them. And so I don't think I was going to last very long at FERC anyway. So I left FERC. I went to work for a large law firm for 3 years, and then I started my own practice. And when I had worked at the law firm, I was working with mostly large companies and corporations, and I didn't really feel like I had a connection with the clients. And so in my firm, I represented small companies, either renewable energy inventors and developers who were smaller. And it was probably about 10 years ago that I started doing landowner work. I had a case that was referred to me by a colleague who I had worked with on other energy matters. And I was called to speak to a bunch of irate constituents. And at that time, I didn't know a lot about how the FERC gas process worked. It actually is far less regulated than the hydro projects. There are a lot of statutes and environmental protections in place for hydro that don't apply to gas. But I quickly figured out how the system worked, and I had that case. And then I just started getting calls on other pipelines, because there really weren't any attorneys who knew the FERC side of pipeline work and also knew the eminent domain side of it. And so I started getting a lot of calls because of that.
Yeah, eminent domain has that's become a really big subject with us, because it's weird. People didn't have that big of an issue with it if people were being responsible with what they were doing. And that's not been the case with anything that has to do with this whole project. Kurt, I would like you to introduce yourself. I know you are a professional who's worked in the field for a long time, and I would like everyone to know where you come from and kind of where you stand in all this.
Hi, my name's Kurt Kamen. I'm do environmental inspection and monitoring. I've worked as a third-party FERC monitor. I've worked as a third-party county monitor. And then I've also been an EI, just a regular EI, as well as a lead EI on several projects.
What does that stand for? EI?
Lead environmental inspector. I've had everything from managing one environmental inspector under me to having 6 environmental inspectors under me. Typically, especially on FERC projects, we'll try to hit somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 EI per 20 miles or so. If you're in the hills, of course, it changes the terrain, the needs to cover the terrain. But basically, what you could legitimately get out and walk in, one person could get out and walk in a day and cover your spread. And that's, like I said, I've had up to 5 or 6 EIs on a spread, and as few as 1 on other spreads. So I think it's a little different. You're more in a managerial and a coordination, coordinating with agencies from whatever state, DEQ, Texas, TCEQ, and then of course on FERC jobs, you are the per se spokesperson to the whatever your third party FERC monitor. If they have an issue, you and them, y'all are the ones that do the speaking. And of course, if it escalates, then it may go to different channels. But as far as day to day on the ground, that it's your lead EI and your FERC monitor that do coordinating. Yeah,
and that was something I didn't really. Well, I think I actually knew it, but it didn't really hit me until today, where the pipeline will have to pay for the inspection, but the inspection is responsible to the regulatory agency.
Correct. And when you say inspection, you mean like the third party monitor, or? Oh,
well, yeah, I guess that is what I mean. So I'm not going to have all the terms right, so feel free to.
Right. No, yeah. and I understand that. So, but you're right. The oil and gas company as a cost of doing business. I mean, it costs, but the third party FERC monitor is paid for. Their salary is paid for by the oil and gas company as part of doing business. Typically, the allegiance should belong to FERC as that third party monitor, and beyond them writing the check, the oil and gas company really there should be limitations as to what influences. In other words, that oil and gas company shouldn't be allowed to fire them. Their job shouldn't be endangered for writing a non-compliance, even though that is on a FERC job, a non-compliance equals a civil issue. That's a ticket. Problem areas may not be, but I mean, problem areas lead to non-compliances, and non-compliances lead to severe actions, whether it's being shut down or whatnot. But normally all that coordination, the third party FERC monitor handles that, and it is also, through their field manager, project manager, and into on the chain of command as needed if there is an escalation. But yes, their salary is paid basically from the oil and gas company.
Has that been a system that, and I was pulling up some videos here. I believe you guys could see them. And since we ended with you in the introductions, I wanted to play a couple of these to just get your professional opinion on what we're seeing here. This is the Sandy Creek farm that we've been out to, and I was looking at these, and we were joking beforehand that if I wouldn't have known that they were building a pipeline here, I would have thought they were building a canal because it seems to be that. Oh wait, I accidentally paused something. Okay, we'll just start that again. Sorry guys, I can't get everything right. But like when I'm looking at these things, and I guess at first look, not really, being in the industry and really learning a lot of this along the way, I wouldn't know exactly what I'm looking at to see what's wrong with this. And like I said, I totally, I respect, we don't want to do anything that could complicate your livelihood at all. So, I want to ask you, just as an environmental inspector, what do you see here when we see this massive amounts of flooding and mud and everything?
Okay, so Nate and I talked a little bit about this. I'm just like everyone else. I think a lot of people do a knee-jerk response and say, "Oh my God," and what's going on, and then I start breaking it down. But I do try to. I kind of take a far-off view, and then I try to break it down and look at the individual systems going on, and then I try to look at how the law, whether it's federal, state, local, and there's several issues that are going on here that I see, and you have laws, especially within 404 as conditional requirements. You have other standalone laws, and then you have some watershed laws that talk about you can't stop or impede that migration of water, whether it's through a channel, you have sheet flows, and watershed laws are kind of different, and they may change from state to state and local region to local region. So I don't want to get into too much of the sheet flow and watershed laws, but generally suffice it to say, you cannot impede that flow. You can't stop the migration of water. Okay, whether you're channelizing, you're building bridges to get over channels or what, and they have to accommodate a normal storm event, which I do need. I mean, you need to kind of look at that and say, okay, was this generated from a normal storm event? If not, it doesn't detract from it being a problem area, and it certainly doesn't alleviate any responsibility for making things right. What it may do is it may shift the onus of, is it a problem area or is it a failure to be prepared, for a normal storm event. So, but the flooding, obviously it looks as, and in talking to Nate, there are channels and drainage patterns out there that, they obviously didn't allow for them to continue to flow. And would that have mitigated a lot of this? It would appear so. I mean, I can't say it didn't happen, so I don't want to make a wild guess. But I mean, it's obvious that the drainage was not allowed to take its normal course of action, which we're not supposed to impede.
And I think here, actually, as this video plays, and I believe, and Nate, I have you unmuted if you want to chime in. Isn't this the Barrington's water line that we're seeing them move right there? I think it is.
That's the outlet. That's the outlet down at the 90.
Oh, okay, okay.
So you have several, and when you first started it, and this kind of, you have sediment issues. Sediments, I mean, you keep your sediments on the right of way. That way you don't commingle soils. Commingling soils is a mixing of your topsoils and your subsoils. It's not, it's a violation. And so the water on that tube there on the left looks relatively clear, but the one on the right, if they're the water on the right looks like it could be silt laden, and therefore that's why you see the murky water. But the water, coming off the drain on the left, it was fairly clear looking. Why they didn't have this in a filter bag, and normally if this is a channel, I mean, normally we don't discharge, and we certainly don't discharge open lines to prevent sediments building up and erosion along the channel embankment. This should go through a filter bag and then be discharged. Filter bag is just a form of dissipating any kind of water force and then capturing, to some extent, larger sediments. And that's what we're looking for, to prevent and minimize the silt-laden water. Like I said, the one on the left looks fairly clear. The one on the right, it does appear to be silt laden. And had they run these through a filter bag, it would have probably got out, a lot more of this. But the big thing is it's not going to be causing that erosion along the embankment, which is going to stir up more sediments in the actual channel. It's a violation. It's against the rules, the regs, and certainly it's against 402. And
it doesn't sound like it's at all undoable. Like, exactly what to do in order to make it not look like this.
Yeah,
That's
I have a
correct.
comment. I have
And
a comment on this. If you can hit play just a rural, which is a little bit,
Yeah.
I want to show like if you can where it zooms out a little bit. Yeah,
Mhm.
like right there. Okay.
How about there?
Yeah. So my issue with this is not so is because I don't know if you can tell, but there's about a 10-foot by 5-foot section that has been taken out of the creek that has now created this new erosion or slip pattern that now is to this day is they try to fix it, but it continues to do this, and this is why this is a violation, and this is why this is an issue. This is a big issue because it continuously will create that pattern. You can kind of see where it's a big area. It's like a semicircle there because they kept doing that over and over and over. Now it won't go. Every time they try to fix it, it keeps continuing. It keeps trying to go back to that path, but it's got a huge section there's cut out, and everyone to water. I mean, they're watering into the creeks. There is some silt always, going to get into the creeks, and you can minimize that impacts. But now it's a problem. It's a really big impact because it continues to come back. And as we go on, if you have any pictures, I think I provided a couple of them.
Yeah.
Of current condition, you can see the exact same area that has now slipped even worse. It won't. It's a new path that bank has taken.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest problem that I'm having with that is.
Well, and that was something that, and I've learned a lot about dirt since about soil since I've been working on this, and one thing that they made a comment about last time I was out there was the fact that since they weren't filtering it, that they washed God knows how much topsoil right into the rivers and in the Gulf of Mexico. They're like, it's gone. It doesn't even exist anymore. And I was wondering what you would have to say about that as well, Kurt. Would that be your assessment as well, is through all that silt that they're basically washing away the good soil that was there?
In a nutshell, yes. I mean, whether it makes it to the Gulf of Mexico, I couldn't tell you, but I mean, the landowners obviously lost soil. Okay. And that's what there's multiple issues that I have with something on this. I mean, from the landowner side, he's generated drainages in now areas that probably never ponded before. He's lost topsoil, which, in an agricultural industry or location, that's a big issue. The other thing is and it's kind of hard to say, and I take issue with it, is the tracking off the right of way. And I mean, you can go to the landowner and say, hey, look, we can't go up and down the right of way. But if to understand what happens is when, and I can't tell you that the landowner did that or if the contractor did that, but I was looking at some pictures and it was obvious that the contractor, it was tracks. And I mean, not tractor, but it was tracks equipment. And the reason I bring it up is, and contractors in general across the board tend not to get too concerned about rutting. And rutting to me in my world is very important because it does mix the soils and the topsoils. Now, you'll have different people that argue whether it's a little bit or a lot of it. And the point is, to me, is once you get to a certain extent, the soils are mixed. And again, they're lost. You cannot regain that topsoil. Now, nature can create new topsoil, and moist areas do it faster than dry areas. At this, he's obviously watering. He used to water this area, so I mean, it didn't obviously have some of the issues that we're observing now. But again, I would be concerned about my soil loss, whether it's through rutting, whether it's through them inappropriately discharging stormwater off the right of way. I see things like that. If it's not off the right of way, I'm not going to say anything. Even if it's silt, the reason is if it's subsoil and I'm putting subsoil, and subsoil
then I don't tend to get too angst over that. What I get angst over is when I start seeing topsoil and subsoils being mixed, when I see subsoils and topsoils being taken off the right of way, getting into channels, because now you've affected other natural resources. And again, there's other sections of the Clean Water Act that talk about pollution downstream, and and what Nate said exactly about, and also eroding out certain areas. And now you've basically pushed those sediments further downstream, and you don't know, it may not, in 20 years from now, it may not have an impact, but it might. You don't know how you change the natural resources. So yes, not just from the landowner point of view, but from, just a natural resource management, that is now an issue that should be dealt with. Will it be dealt with? It's hard to say. I mean, how do you go back and get that soil lost, and how do you, if it's on a different landowner, how do you go to that other landowner and say, hey, we're going to take some dirt? Well, how do you prove whose is whose? So in a nutshell, to me, it's lost.
Yeah, it seems that way, and it's something. And we had some pictures before about showing that nice big black topsoil, and then like the redder clays and stuff underneath all of that, and the way it had looked before that you showed us, Nate. And there was like 20 inches or it may be more than that.
37 and a half.
37 and a half. Yeah. So that's
27 and a half.
27 and a half. That was a giant sponge that took up the water and used it throughout the field. And now I'm seeing, with all of that stuff mixed in, it just basically made a road. I mean, it's just like the water just sits on top of it and never sinks down.
Yeah.
So Caroline, I was coming to you last on purpose. I wanted to get some of the mechanics of this talked about first. It's like it's soil science, not rocket science, I guess, but it's still like there's very definite ways you go about it. And I think the layman, just like me, I wasn't privy to this. I wouldn't have ever thought about how to dig a pipeline in correctly. Now that I see it, and I see the experts are saying this is what was wrong, this is probably what was wrong, this is the way it should look at least. And so we've got the landowners on one side who are dealing with this. You got the pipeline, or I guess some kind of trifecta, the pipeline that really could have done a better job, but they didn't. And then you have the regulatory commission on top of this, supposed to be bridging all of these gaps. And so this is where you've come in. And so we've gone through these steps. Where do you come into it?
Well, where I would have liked to come into it was a year before the pipeline was approved, because one of the problems, that the problem begins in the approval process. When FERC examines these projects, they're supposed to look at all of the potential environmental impacts. And typically what the commission does is, rather than undertake its own independent assessment of potential impacts, it defers to the company. And the company never talks about everything that will happen. Instead, they make promises about what they intend to do. So every application for a project that goes through an agricultural property will have the pipeline committing to segregate topsoil and to conduct decompaction tests and to have a soil scientist on site and to have environmental inspectors. And the intention is very different from the reality. So after these projects, after construction begins, it's really up to FERC to hold the company to its promises. And those promises are incorporated into the certificate, which is, it's a license, it's a binding document. Just like, when you get a driver's license and the law says you're not supposed to drink when you drive, you're supposed to abide by the terms of this certificate. And if the certificate has incorporated these promises you've made, that's what the company is supposed to do. And that's where FERC tends to fall short. It doesn't oversee it doesn't take into account all of these reports that are happening and make sure that the construction is going correctly the way it should be going. And, part of it is there are staffing issues, but the other issue is there really isn't any formal procedure by which a landowner can go to FERC and ask for relief. In fact, FERC has said that what the landowner has to do is go to the company and raise their complaints to the company and wait for the company to respond, and then go back to the company. And then at that point, possibly talk to a project manager. But none of these are really it's not really a process with any kind of bite. And so as a result, you have all of this damage occurring, and you don't have the regulator stepping in unless you have a really extreme situation. I think for this project, FERC did shut construction down for a month, which was helpful, but it also puts the company behind schedule. And so they just moved forward very quickly and just ignored other regulations moving forward. So I believe they corrected some of the problems that they were shut down for, but they committed other violations in their haste to complete the project and to meet their in-service deadline.
Well, it's like the entire thing didn't have any teeth.
Yeah, and we had actually filed FERC does have a formal complaint process where parties can go to FERC and they can raise a complaint, and if FERC denies the complaint, then they can challenge it in a court. But when we tried to avail ourselves of that process, FERC said, oh no, that's not for landowners. That's just for everybody else, even though their regulation says it does apply to landowners. So to the extent that there was a procedure available, FERC has said it doesn't apply to landowners. They have to go through this process with the company. And of course, that doesn't really work very well.
It seems like from my end of it that the whole bureaucracy of it all set up is to encourage people to not seek resolution.
Yeah, it's funny because the part of the FERC process also assumes that before the project gets built, that the company will negotiate easements with the landowners, and that will give the landowners a private right of action. But what has happened increasingly in many cases is that landowners have not been able to negotiate easements with companies, and they go through eminent domain. And so they're really left at the mercy of FERC or the regulators to protect their property. And the system it's not effective. And this is something that's happening. It used to be like 10 or 15 years ago when these projects were built, many landowners were very uninformed, or else projects would go through very, very remote areas where individuals weren't impacted. But increasingly, landowners have become much more informed, partly because of companies like Central, and also because there's sort of a network of landowners who share information about each other. The rise of the internet has allowed people to do research on things like soil science and compaction and really understand the impacts that these pipelines have. And so when people are more educated, they're going to raise these problems further, and so they don't get swept under the rug. And I think that the Commission is really unprepared to deal with these issues because for so long people were in the dark, and now they're informed.
And would your assessment be that it has gotten worse recently than what it was before? Because before, some like the big protests in like the Dakotas and stuff for like the Keystone pipeline and stuff like that. Those are the things that made the news. And you're talking about those remote pipelines that go out in the middle of nowhere. Would you say this is something that we used to be more responsible with, and is perhaps as a consequence of perhaps the political atmosphere, this has been relaxed?
I think that's part of it. I think the other thing is everything is just very company dependent. I've worked with companies who have been more responsive, I would say. And when I say more responsive, I don't mean they do everything perfectly, but at least if you bring an issue to their attention, they usually will address it relatively promptly. So the onus is still on the landowner in those cases, but the company will respond. In some of these more recent cases, it appears that the companies have been less responsive. And again, the Commission is just not prepared to take action against these companies for whatever reason. So I don't know if these same types of problems had come up, 5 or 10 years ago, I don't know what the reaction would have been. I know that also because the permitting process does take longer, and it doesn't take longer because people are opposing projects. It takes longer because since people are watching the application process, the company has to produce certain information. And often the company doesn't submit information that's needed to evaluate these impacts. So, you know, that also accounts for some of the delay. So I think that because the permitting process takes a little bit longer, the companies are also they act with more haste to get the pipeline constructed. And that's really something they need to take account of in their planning process. You know, companies should be able to figure out how much the level of information that they need to submit. I mean, and if they can't figure it out, FERC sits down with companies and tells them exactly what kind of information they need to submit in order to get a certificate. So it's not rocket science, but the companies have been so accustomed to just submitting the bare minimum that now that they have to be more accountable because the public is watching, they're not prepared to do that. And as a result, the process takes more time. And then of course the companies blame it on the opposition. It's really, the blame is just that now they have to comply, whereas they didn't before. And so I think the projects are moving more quickly, and that leads to a lot of this carelessness in construction, and also a knowledge that they're not going to be accountable. I mean, the other issue with these construction issues is they've really gone under the radar. A lot of the groups that challenge pipelines, like Sierra Club or NRDC, they have looked at it from the perspective of before the pipeline goes in the ground. Once it goes in, they kind of move on to their next pipeline to challenge, and nobody is keeping watch on what is happening during construction. So that's another reason why these issues are coming up now, is again, because companies like Central have been advocating for the landowners, and they're highlighting a lot of these construction related issues.
And I think you've been wanting to chime in, Nate.
Yeah,
It was a perfect segue. I was going to take advantage of it.
Well, my issue is, you know, just the monitoring these companies, and you know, if you go out there and you see issues like that, and you know, Kurt goes out there and sees, you know, several problems, even in problem areas, or you know, or non-compliance, and he walks away. I mean, it's pretty. What do you think the company's going to do? Oh, we better stop now. Let's do the right thing. No, they're going to say, oh, we got away with it. Let's keep going. And I kind of relate it to like a speeding ticket. You pass a sheriff going 100 miles per hour in a 25, and he waves at you. He's probably going to speed again. So that's kind of, I mean, it's a big issue, and the impacts, you know, the impacts are so severe, just because here we are 2 years later, and it doesn't even look like the same property. So now we got to figure out what to do. And now that, you know, it might be an issue for FERC now they're like, uh-oh, we're not sure what to do now, you know. So we're trying to figure out a game plan to resolve it, but there's this extensive damage, and you know, there needs to be better oversight, I guess I can say, during the construction to prevent this kind of stuff. You know, these landowners are not at all, and I want to make it very, very clear, they are not at all protesting or against these pipelines. They are promoting it. They want more pipelines, but they don't want to be treated this unfairly, you know, being taken advantage like they are. Like, I mean, we have filed to FERC. We have talked to Department of Energy. We talked to the Department of basically every department there possibly is. No one's paying attention to it, because I think a lot of times they don't understand it. Me and Kurt talked about that, about, you know, just they don't really realize what's happening, because it is kind of complicated. You know, you have the inspectors, you have the compliance monitors, you have the pipeline companies, you have, you know, kind of FERC sitting in the you know, the back seat basically. And if it's amazing though what happens when FERC does get involved. There has been a couple situations. As soon as they get involved, the company is like they're like on it. You know, they fix it, resolve it. So they have so much power that it's very, even a simple letter or a simple, you know, just correspondence with the company. Hey, this is a problem. You guys need to fix it. If FERC says something, they jump. And I don't know if Kirk can
that's what I was
because
so I was coming to
he's on
next.
that side, you know, is because you know, if FERC, if you get a call from FERC or from Washington or, you know, OEP, and they tell you, hey, you guys, I don't want to call you again. You need to fix this right now. They will be running to fix whatever it is. But the issue is there's so much damage and impact and so many landowner issues that they didn't do anything. And I'm really pushing them to, you know, instead of getting, you know, nasty with each other and you know, going into blaming, you know, this person, that person, I said, can we please get you guys just to address this with the company, with us, and let's just get this resolved. So the biggest problem is, I think, the compliance and the inspections. And you can, if anybody knows, with, you know, it follows central land stuff, you can see we file probably more reports than the company files on the FERC docket. So we have filed plenty of things, and that there needs to be better oversight. There needs to be improvement in the compliance department.
Yeah, it sounds like all the power's there. It's just not being taken advantage of. And Kurt, you know, and I've seen you want to chime in on a couple of these things, and but I also want to ask you on whatever you want to address is how would you go about seeking change, like just from your perspective, the things that you see that's going wrong. Like we're hearing a lot from the high up part of it with like the commission and everything from DC, but you're there on the ground, and why aren't these two things really connecting and making a difference?
So I guess I had a couple to answer your question. I'm going to do it, but I'm going to by what's happened to me. Okay. And I can't relate it to any specific project, but so as a lead, I'm over in the hills, in the mountains, West Virginia, Ohio, wherever you want to say, and I'm dealing with the slip. And that slip is going to impact somebody's house. FERC gets involved, but it's from the perspective of who is responsible for the slip. If the landowner, slips occur naturally, you know, indirect action, and then all of a sudden you have a slip where a landslide. So what part should FERC play in that? And that it goes out there, you know, gas company, you need to do this. This is what it appears to us. And if it's without a doubt, and FERC comes out there and says, no, you will cease and desist all activity. You're going to shore this up. You're going to repair this. You're going to do this and bring all materials back onto the right of way that have slipped off. We see this as a direct action, or, you know, result of your actions. And, so in that sense, FERC does help the landowner. If FERC comes in and says, in a different scenario, FERC comes in and says, you know, hey, we got a phone call from a landowner. Please go out there and see if there's a compliance issue. Well, what's wrong? Well, he's lost his underground spring. He cannot get his underground spring back. Now, at this point, is it a non-compliance? Well, no, the contractor, the gas company does everything right. Okay. I mean, they do, it's going to become a litigation. So what does FERC have? And there's a point to me bringing up this specific case. What point does FERC have if there's not a non-compliance? The landowner didn't want them there in the first place. They did do a condemnation, went through, and they did lose their underground spring, couldn't get it back. They spent thousands and thousands of dollars to get this underground spring back and trying to make it right. Yes, there was attitude. Yes, there was a lot of things that were very contentious and it was not amicable, but the effort was legitimately made. So what brings me back to circle around is something that I think that was key in what Nate and what Caroline said, is that you start bringing in people from the beginning when the oil and gas company is doing their pre-planning, and in the NEPA process, they have to have alternative routes and they have to submit alternative routes, and they try to pick what's best for them. That doesn't say what's best for our resources. It doesn't say what's best for the landowners. It's what's most, and we're forgetting about two words, reasonable and feasible. You know, it does have to be reasonable. It does have to be feasible. Well, if a landowner comes in and says, hey, if you come in on this side of the hill, you know, you're going to tear up in an area that has few underground springs, you're going to hit a virgin underground spring, and more than likely, you're not going to be able to get it back. In the beginning of the process, had there been some kind of oversight, whether through someone like Nate's company or FERC or some other regulatory that has a better oversight during the planning phase, before they spend hundreds and thousands of dollars going through all these alternative routes, but that's an outside source that's agenda is not necessarily the gas company. Maybe that could have avoided a situation like that. And I do understand that if we start talking about regulatory laws versus contract, you know, landowner contract, I mean, and I'm not a lawyer and I don't try to be, but my understanding is, and what I was told as a FERC monitor is, if there's a compliance issue and you write a non-compliance, if nothing else, if it eventually does go to court, then that lawyer can turn around and say, this was even, you know, a non-compliance. They were cited civilly or, you know, for this action. Yes, I mean, so again, better education of landowners before, and I do understand that, you know, the gas companies in different states, we talked briefly about it, about the condemnation, and I'm not saying that gas companies don't take advantage of this or that they don't bully landowners around when you get certain land reps. We got some great land reps out there too. I will say that, you know, they come out there if there's a problem, and so, you know, it's a shame that when we have situations that do occur where the gas company obviously either jumps the gun, they don't follow the regs, they don't do what they say they're gonna do, and then they turn around, the contractor says, okay, well, we'll take care of it when we're getting ready to leave, because by law, by the regs, you know, they have to return everything to original conditions to the extent possible or nearest possible. Oh, we'll take care of it at the end. Well, of course, at the end, everybody's been there, they're over, you know, they've gone way over their schedule, they've gone way over their budget. So now it's just a hurry up and get out of there. And, oh, by the way, what happened to getting everything back to the original extent? I think that's something that, you know, I can't tell you, and I don't want to get involved with, is that FERC's responsibility. I mean, you have contractual agreements between, you know, but this again is something where Nate or FERC or, you know, some oversight can come in and step in and say, whoa, let's educate the owner. They don't have to sign off. Now, then someone else may do it. But I mean, again, this is going to become litigious. And this is just another kind of iron in the fire against the gas company whenever it does become an issue. The thing is it is expensive. It is time consuming. Oil and gas company knows that, and they do take advantage of that. I don't want anyone to go out and build a pipeline across my property and not take care of my property.
Sure.
But at the same time, I have no problem with the pipeline coming across my property and then putting in, you know, a line that's going to help out my local community, or a transmission line that we're moving product and stuff like that. So it's not that I'm against it. What I do believe is that they should be held accountable. Yes, FERC could, I've been on projects where some of these problems, they didn't exist because they did do that. Is this a breakdown in the system? Is it a breakdown in the project management? I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I wasn't there. But I think FERC obviously needs to provide or upgrade their consistency or the level of consistency. And also bring in something, as Nate and I have talked about, that is more landowner orientated. And maybe I am out of place or not, I don't know. But I believe that they provide that kind of, or allow for the provision. I don't want to say that the government necessarily should, but if they allow for that incorporation of oversight and that it holds and it's just as binding as any other part, that contract should be binding, but because there is no oversight, they get bullied and they're impacted. And I don't, I hate to use that term bullied, but if you're going to use your resources to take advantage of somebody, and you got in oil and gas, there are some oil and gas companies, then yes, it is a form of bullying. I hate to say it that way. I love oil and gas industry. It's done really good by me. It's something that I'm proud to be a part of, but there's also things that we need to step up our game. Whether you can do it through FERC, I believe the oversight, consistent oversight, I guess is a good way to say it. I don't mean to drone on, so I'm going to let it go at that. But I believe, consistent oversight, especially that brings the landowner in to the same level as any regulatory agency, whether it be FERC or standalone laws for non-FERC projects. But when you start bringing in that level of oversight for the landowner, I think it changes the game, and it changes the mentality of the oil and gas company. They now know that when they walk away from a project, that it's got to be as good or better than what it originally was.
Yeah, and then I'm going to Caroline right after this, and like we're kind of running out of time. I tried to keep it a little bit shorter, but like the conversations were too complex. I couldn't do it. It's like we were talking about the other day. Is it's either me and my producer, me and my wife, and we were like, America just can't stop stealing people's lands. Like that's what we started doing, and it's like we're doing it again with eminent domain and all this stuff. And it's like we just can't stop ourselves from doing this. And that is like it all comes around to them, people just being able to do whatever they want. And I know that that's what you've been so focused on, Caroline.
Yeah, as I've said, eminent domain is an extraordinary power, even when a government exercises it. Here, that power is delegated to a private company. And so what courts have traditionally said in that situation is that you really have to be very strict and narrow the scope of the powers that you give to the company, because it's exercising a government authority. But yeah, the eminent domain is something that just really changes the dynamic in these cases, because it's a combination of two things. It's the eminent domain, which means that the company knows that it can always acquire the property by force if it can't negotiate an easement. If a company has to negotiate an easement, they're going to be much more, the landowner's going to have leverage, basically. So the landowner's going to be able to negotiate terms that are favorable. And the second thing is, and this is something most people don't know, most people know that the Fifth Amendment says that property shall not be taken without just compensation. So people realize that when your property is taken, at least you get paid for it. And people think you get paid for it up front, but this is not the case. What the courts do is they allow the company to take the property now and pay for it later. They've concocted this whole very unconstitutional scheme that has been challenged on multiple occasions, but nobody's ever won on it yet. And so the problem is that as these companies they're acquiring access to the property for free, they're building the pipeline, they're putting the pipeline in service and generating profit. And meanwhile, you have these landowners who are losing farming season. And the other thing is, can you imagine a scenario where, like, I want to go to a hotel, I go to a hotel, I say, I'll pay you at the end of my stay. I stay there for 2 years, I trash the place, and then I leave, and I say, you got to chase me down. That's exactly what the scenario is right now. And part of that is just not entirely related to FERC. It's because, you know, Congress allowed the power of eminent domain, and then the courts have exercised it in a way that is very expansive for companies. So that just makes things much worse.
It all seems to benefit the people with the most money, and like government's supposed to be the other way around.
I know.
Right. It's supposed to benefit the people at the very lowest that have no say. That's the whole point of government, right? To give everyone a say. And it's you know, like even things like grass in a hayfield, right? These companies are looking at it as if it's just grass or whatever, you know, and I'm not saying they all do, but it seems to be at least this one seems to be looking at it like that. And it's the smallest thing can cause these interruptions in anyone's business and anyone's livelihood. Like I had internet problems at the beginning of this week. I was stressing out all week because I knew that we were going to be having this. And my ISP was actually worked with me really well to get it resolved. And whew, okay, things are better. But this is not what the people in this that have been the victim of this midship pipeline have had at all, besides you and Nate and a few others.
Yeah, again, it's a situation where there's no leverage. I mean, if you're ISP, you could go on Twitter and post a tweet and say this horrible company, and they'll lose your business and others. So they have a financial motive to continue to serve you well. I mean, you post a negative review about a pipeline, nobody cares. You file negative complaints at FERC. FERC doesn't do anything. So there's really nothing to compel them to work with the landowner, except for a change in attitude or more of a fear of regulatory oversight.
Yeah, fear seems to be what keeps them in line, like the being afraid of being fined, being afraid of losing licenses and having a hard time getting licensed again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, Nate and I had already talked about doing a part 2 of this about a month from now, where we can get into some more stuff. And I hope we can, because this is like, we spent an hour doing it, but we still just kind of like sort of did the surface of it. And I know that these are weeds that got really deep roots. Nate, since you're the one that brought us all together in the beginning, I'm going to go ahead and hand the end of it to you. What is it you want to leave with the audience, or, you know, anybody who watches this?
Yeah, I guess I want to say one comment to when Kurt was talking about oversight and, you know, different route selection, different decisions. I mean, and that's kind of going to lead into the last part. But we sat down with midship, and I think, you know, the higher ups in the corporate, I believe there was 12, I don't know, 10 or 12 of them, and explained Barrington's route, you know, that Sandy Creek Farms tract, and how you know, all the drainage patterns and the low-lying areas and the creek in the 90s, and basically the whole everything, and no other pipeline has ever went down that way. So that's just an idea of, if we had some more oversight, like Kurt was talking about addressing those things from the beginning, you know, that could change a lot. And that leads me into my next thing, is we are we're working on creating a nonprofit that will assist several communities and landowners, and try to go to the FERC level and create an advocate, you know, a landowner advocate organization, basically, and possibly even make changes in our environmental policies. So that's kind of like the next step, and I think we were going to discuss that in the part 2. But you know, basically myself, if you can imagine what I discussed, what Kurt discussed, and what Caroline discussed, all together as one organization addressing all the issues, you know, covering all the different angles, and working with the landowners, and having, you know, environmental inspectors for the landowners, and you know, kind of having that angle, and then having the legal side, and then having our expertise in the beginning, and commenting on, you know, the beginning steps of, you know, when they do their environmental impact statements. So that's kind of what I get in next, you know, the next part 2. But I just wanted to comment, you know, that's a prime example of, hey, this is our route selection. This is our, you know, our suggestion. And if they would have, I can't help but say, but if you guys would have listened and went a different route, you would not have a new canal or creek or river or whatever everybody calls it. But that's we want to be the oversight, basically the oversight organization that puts this all together and kind of gives the push for all parties involved.
I think you'll be busy. I think you will be. Okay, guys. If you guys would just hang out for a second, just let me finish up the show real quick, and I'm just gonna turn off your audio and your video real quick, and I'll be right back for you guys. Thank you everyone for being here. This has really been awesome, and I know everybody has a busy schedule, so I will we'll see each other in